Hello everyone, I'm Julia and this is Florence. We will be presenting about developing social skills in school-age children. Before we begin, we would like to pay our respects to the First Nations people observing our presentation today and acknowledge their ongoing commitment to protecting the land on which we live and learn. Social skills refer to some learned behaviors based on the social rules. It allows us to interact appropriately with others in the society. Today, we will be covering everything about social skills. Social skills can be divided into two parts, verbal and non-verbal. For verbal, they involve everything in conversations. So they include maintaining a topic, initiating a topic, our volume use, and taking turns. For non-verbal, they mostly involve our body language and eye contact. Let's think about why social skills are important to us. Firstly, with good social skills, we will have positive relationship with others. These can help us build different social relationships like making friends, socializing with our boss and colleagues, maintaining a healthy relationship with our families. Social skills also help us build self-esteem and build a sense of belonging to this society. This will then satisfy our mental health well-being. According to the Maslow hierarchy of needs, as you can see here, friends and intimate relationships are in the yellow part. So they are strongly linked to the psychological needs. So therefore, everyone needs friends to satisfy their psychological needs. Social skills are also strongly linked to our success throughout different life stages. According to Wenso, children who have positive social relationships with their peers usually have a higher level of academic achievement. Social skills are also a good predictor of adult success. For example, social skills can affect our employment by affecting our relationship with our colleagues and interview performance. Social skills are also good predictors of whether a person will involve in criminal activities and substance use. For children with poor social skills, they may find it hard to make friends. Without friends, they may feel very lonely and sad. So with these kids, challenging behaviors in the classroom are very common. So they may scream or refuse to follow instructions to gain attention, or they may isolate themselves. So they are more likely to get into fights and to be bullied by their peers. When they are not having a good time at school, children may avoid going to school and therefore impact their attendance. As I know, a lot of teachers have raised concern about children's volume control. So they may sound too loud or too soft. Now let's see what can happen when the children are not using an appropriate volume. So when they are sounding too soft, listener may find it hard to follow and understand the children. When they're giving a public speech or presentation, they may also sound unpersuasive too. On the other hand, children may sound too loud. So this can sound disruptive or impolite. When we are teaching them to control their volume accurately, we usually introduce a vocal loudness scale to them. So there are 6 volume levels. They are silence, whisper, conversation voice, presentation voice, outdoor voice, and emergency voice. By quantifying the volume level, this helps children visualize the scale and build a concrete understanding of volume control. Now, let's look at some activities to practice volume control with children. Firstly, this activity is called Pick the Right Volume to Use. After introducing the volume scale, the teachers can give the children different scenarios that they may encounter in their everyday lives. So we have to make the scenario relevant and familiar to them. Some examples can be going to the library, recess time, or when you are giving a presentation. The children will need to look at the scale again and pick the appropriate volume to use. The second activity is practicing using different volumes. So get a spinning wheel and have all the 5 loudness levels written on it. Give the children a topic, let's say like your favorite animal, and then spin the wheel. So children will need to use the picked volume to say the name of their favorite animals. The next activity can be role playing. We can use this to practice whisper, conversation voice, presentation voice, and outdoor voice. Bring the children to some specific places and practice using the voice. So for whisper, we can just bring them to the library. For conversation voice, get them to have some group discussions. For presentation voice, ask them to give a presentation in front of the class. We can practice using the outdoor voice in the sports class or on the playground. Make sure to tell them whether they need to be louder or softer when practicing. You can use gesture like this, louder, to show they have to be louder. Sometimes they sound too soft just because they are shy. So to build their confidence, we need to be supportive and provide direct praises. So when they have to give a presentation, make sure that they are well prepared. Write a script with them and practice together if they are very anxious. You can also allow them to have a small item in their hands or pockets so the item can give them courage for their presentation. Now let's talk about turn taking. Normally, we have two types of turn taking, play-based and conversational turn taking. For play-based turn taking, it is all about taking turns when playing. For conversational turn taking, one person speaks while the other listens. The roles are exchanged back and forth. These little cartoons demonstrate a nice turn taking here. Turn taking is important because we need to be polite in social situations. This helps us build positive relationship with others. There are different activities to practice turn taking. We usually start with play-based turn taking. A typical turn-taking game can just be getting a ball and ask the students take turn to throw and catch the ball. Some other games, such as guessing game, are turn-taking games too. Teacher can prepare a set of items. Students take turns to pick one item and describe it. Others will need to guess the item. Some other activities can be sorting objects. Teacher can get hula hoops and name them according to different categories like colors or shapes. Students can take turns getting the items and put them to the corresponding hula hoops. One of the very common games, Bus of Hairy Legs, can be a turn-taking game too. In this game, the teacher chooses a spelling word. The student will take turns to spell it out letter by letter. When the spelling game is complete, the next 4 students take turns to say butts of hairy legs. There are so many different turn-taking games. As long as the students are taking turns, the games can be a turn-taking game. When you're playing the games, we can prepare flashcards like a wait and stop signs like this. Like this. You can also go creative and point out everyone's faces to indicate their turns. Questions like whose turn is it can help build students' awareness to take turns too. For conversational turn taking, a common practice that we use are social stories. Social stories are short stories explaining social skills and appropriate responses to different situations. They can be written or in a video, so they are always short and simple. This video gives an example of a social story of turn taking.
So for today's story, we are going to talk about taking turns. The class was having a story time, and Miss Annie was about to read a book on dragons. Everyone was quiet and patiently waiting for the interesting story. Once upon a time, there was a knight named Sir William Wallace. He was... Oh, Miss Annie, my daddy told me a story about Knight 2 last night. It was fun, Ryan interrupted. Oh, that's nice, Ryan. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, There was a knight named Sir. There was dragons and fairies too. Do you think this story have those too? Ryan interrupted again. Maybe, but if you keep interrupting, we may not be able to find out. Why don't you wait till the end of the story to share your story? Miss Annie said. It's good to share, but remember that we need to take turns to talk, Miss Annie reminded. Yes, Miss Annie, I'm sorry, Ryan apologized. Miss Annie continued telling the story, and everyone enjoyed listening to it. Ryan, now it's your turn to share your story, said Miss Annie. Ryan excitedly shared his story, and the class loved it too.
Now we'll be going through two other aspects of social communication, topic maintenance and initiation, as well as active listening skills. So the research has highlighted a few ways in which these skills can be built upon. Evidence emphasizes the effectiveness of using video modeling to develop social skills in children and adolescents. This will involve you, as the teacher, preparing role play video models, recordings of children engaging in social activities, including conversational discourse. Then, in adjunct with a metacognitive approach to build a child's social motivation, you could show students these video examples of their peers and discuss why it's important to demonstrate these good conversation skills that I will go further in depth to in a bit. Numerous social skills training programs that have been researched, particularly in the field of autism spectrum disorder, have demonstrated the important role that peer modeling can play in the development of social skills in children. But what exactly does topic maintenance and initiation and active listening entail? These might be skills that come easily to us and that we don't give too much thought to, but for children who are still in the process of developing these skills and those who have difficulties doing so, it will be helpful for us to take note of and emphasize to them the different specific components they need to be demonstrating. This is in line with a metacognitive approach that aims to raise a child's awareness of these elements of communication. So let's start with topic maintenance and initiation. There are some ways in which we can start and maintain a conversation with others, one being the use of the communicative intention of asking questions using WH or how words. This informs your conversation partner that you are interested in what they have to say. If your student is not yet at the stage where they are understanding what WH or how questions are, then it would be useful to start by building their understanding through shared book reading and reading comprehension tasks. The other communicative intention we could use in a conversation would be commenting. This will involve recounting personal events, sharing things about oneself, empathizing with your conversation partner, and giving your opinions, whether it's to agree or disagree with them. By telling people about yourself and your thoughts, it also encourages them to share about themselves as well. That being said, one should always aim to use a good balance of questions and comments in a conversation. By asking too many questions and constantly questioning others in a conversation, it makes it sound like you are testing them, which could lead to negative consequences, such as making them sound defensive. On the other hand, by making too many of your own comments, it could make your conversation partner feel like you are not interested in hearing their thoughts. Therefore, it is important for us to be using a good mix of questions and comments to facilitate a positive back and forth conversation. Specific to topic maintenance and initiation, there are a few activities that you could engage your students in. You could get them to think about things they like to do and highlight that these can be topics for conversation. You could also prepare cards with topics on them, and a child has to say things about that particular topic, as well as brainstorming WH or how questions they could use to continue the topic. Children can also be encouraged to use WH questions in a guess who or guess the word or picture game. Finally, it's also important for students to practice listening to what their conversation partner is saying, and based on the keywords used, they could follow up with questions or comments. Before we elaborate further on the different components of active listening, some things to note about them are that, for one, an individual cannot simply demonstrate one component of active listening. Rather, it's about demonstrating all or most components of active listening at any point in time. Secondly, it must be emphasized that one has to look natural and genuine while demonstrating the mentioned nonverbal communication skills and being careful not to overdo it. So we'll start with facial expressions. A small smile, for instance, can be used to show the person speaking that you are paying attention to them, and it's a way for you to reassure them that yes, you are acknowledging what they are saying. We can also think about mirroring. While it's good to smile, it might not always be natural or appropriate to be constantly doing so throughout a conversation. You want to show the speaker that not only do you understand what they are saying, but how they are feeling as well. For instance, if they tell you about something upsetting, you wouldn't be smiling, but you want to show them that you're feeling upset for them as well. Next, posture and body language. So you don't need to sit all the way up straight because that would look too rigid. You want to show that you're listening to them and that you're comfortable in the conversation. So you can drop your shoulder a bit, lean forward a little, not too much, and then maybe tilt your head and nod a little. This is part of ensuring that you have an open posture, so not having crossed arms, as that could give the conversation a closed or negative tone. It's also about not being distracted, not fiddling around with something, or constantly looking at other things in your surroundings. And finally, you can combine all of that with eye contact. It's encouraging when you look directly at the person speaking because, again, it shows that you are paying attention. But of course, you can't be staring at them all the time. So sometimes it is still okay to look away for a bit. That being said, there is an exception in terms of encouraging a student's eye contact during their interactions with others, and that is with students who have autism spectrum disorder. Some with autism spectrum disorder tend to avoid eye contact due to underlying social cognitive difficulties. Indeed, their avoidance could lead to social barriers and hinder their access to the curriculum and academic performance. But on the other side of this coin, there is strong evidence in the research about the lived experiences of people with autism spectrum disorder that highlights the feelings of discomfort, anxiety, stress, invasion, and sensory overload that they experience while making eye contact. Thus, to avoid adverse emotional and psychological reactions, eye contact in children with autism spectrum disorder is something that we should not insist upon them. It is also important to consider that most of what has just been covered in terms of conversational and active listening skills is mostly based on Western literature and is what is considered to be effective communication in Western culture. However, this is slightly different for children and families with an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background. In Western culture, silences in conversation are often considered to be an awkward silence. In contrast, it is valued by and normal for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to leave silences during conversations. This is their way of listening, showing respect or agreement, and should not be misinterpreted as a lack of understanding or agreement, though it would sometimes be useful to clarify. And some nonverbal communication cues, such as hand gestures and facial expressions used, could have different meanings in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture compared to Western culture. Thus, it is important for us to be aware of how our nonverbal communication, particularly in our expression of negative feelings, will be interpreted by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Similarly, if we need more understanding on the nonverbal communication of an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student, we could consider seeking advice from a local staff. And in the Western society, a lack of eye contact is judged as a sign of disrespect, disinterest, or dishonesty. The opposite holds true for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They are not comfortable with direct eye contact and they view it as a sign of disrespect, disinterest, and potentially aggression. It is also important to acknowledge that apart from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures, you might be from a culturally diverse society with people from a range of other cultures where they have different cultural backgrounds. Therefore, to establish a culturally safe school environment for all students, you can be a more informed and culturally sensitive educator by reading up on the social communication practices, family structures of your students. We should be careful not to impose our Western communication standards on students from other cultures and respect their cultural beliefs, values, and communication practices as well. We hope this presentation has given you useful information on how to equip your students well with skills to communicate effectively in the social world we live in today. Thank you.